I've loved my years here in Indiana. So obviously with a lot of uncertainty, you don't know what's to come. That was just such a high moment for our team. Being able to celebrate with each other was really special.
This is the kind of story that flips an entire fan base upside down overnight. One quiet interview, one carefully worded answer, and suddenly, the Indiana Fever's future doesn't feel so certain anymore. Lexie Hull, one of the toughest, most loyal players on that roster, just hinted at something fans didn't want to believe: she's gone. And the craziest part, most people miss the hint entirely.
I built a life here, and I love this franchise. I love the people, I love the fans, so we'll see what comes.
Because when Lexie spoke, she didn't sound like someone reflecting on a season. She sounded like someone saying goodbye. It started as a simple question about free agency. "Have you thought about what next year might look like?" they asked. Lexie smiled, paused, and said, "I'm a restricted free agent, so that changes things a little bit. But I've loved my years here in Indiana. I love the fans. I love the people. I've built a life here, so we'll see what comes." At first glance, it sounded like a normal end-of-season response. But if you followed athletes long enough, you know that line, "We'll see what comes," is the universal translation for "I'm out." The subtlety was masterful. She gave Indiana one last compliment, one last thank you, and left just enough air in her words for the truth to slip through. She's leaving, and the fans who once chanted her name are realizing it too late. Lexie Hull wasn't a superstar by stat sheets, but she was the heart that kept Indiana alive when everything else was falling apart. When Caitlin Clark was under constant scrutiny, when rotations made zero sense, and when half the roster looked like they'd lost the will to fight, Lexie was still there, diving for loose balls, hustling on defense, and doing all the dirty work nobody ever celebrates. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't chasing headlines, she was just consistent. And in a league drowning in chaos, consistency is gold. That's what makes her exit sting the most. Because she wasn't just a player, they could replace a shooter or a defender. She was the glue. And when the glue walks away, everything else starts to crack. If you rewatch that post-game interview carefully, you can almost hear the fatigue in her voice. It wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. Lexie kept saying the word uncertainty. The season was uncertain. The future was uncertain. The league was uncertain. And behind that repetition was the sound of someone who's just tired of holding things together when no one else seems to care. She said she loved the fans, the people, and the city, but she didn't say she loved the franchise. That silence was loud enough to echo through every hallway at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Because that was her goodbye speech, cleverly disguised as a thank you. The truth is, Indiana's season was a train wreck barely held on its tracks by willpower alone. The Fever spent more time experimenting than executing. Rotations changed by the week. Stephanie White's coaching decisions had players questioning their roles night after night. One game, Lexie was defending the opponent's best guard. The next, she was sitting out crucial minutes or chasing rebounds as a small forward. There was no rhythm, no structure, just chaos. And somehow, through it all, Lexie stayed professional. She never complained, never lashed out. She just kept adapting, kept showing up. But adaptability has a limit. And when you start to feel like a spare part in a team that doesn't seem to know where it's going, you eventually pack your bags. Her comments about learning to adapt and doing whatever the team needs weren't just polite sports cliches, they were survival tactics. She was saying, "I did my job, I followed orders, and I'm done being a pawn in this circus." And when she said she was excited to sit down and not do anything for a little bit, you could practically hear the relief. That wasn't rest, it was escape. An escape from a franchise that still hasn't figured out how to build around its biggest star without breaking everything else in the process. But here's where things take a twist. Lexie isn't walking away from basketball. She's walking towards something new, unrivaled. The player-led off-season league founded by Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart. It's designed to give WNBA players more control, more exposure, and yes, more money. For Lexie, this move isn't just about getting more playing time. It's about freedom. It's about control over her own career in a system where players often feel like afterthoughts. And if you look at the timing, it makes perfect sense. The WNBA is heading toward a possible lockout. The CBA is under fire, and players are getting restless. They're tired of being underpaid, overworked, and overlooked. Lexie joining Unrivaled isn't just a career move, it's a statement. She's saying, "I'm not waiting around for this league to fix itself. I'm taking my future into my own hands." And honestly, you can't blame her. Indiana's front office has been a masterclass in mixed signals. They have Caitlin Clark, the most marketable player women's basketball has ever seen. Yet somehow they can't build stability around her. Lexie was one of the few teammates who genuinely understood Caitlin's fire. The two clicked instantly. You could see it in their chemistry on court. Lexie cutting at the perfect time when Caitlin was double-teamed. Lexie chasing down rebounds when everyone else stopped moving. Lexie standing beside her during brutal post-game pressers. Their connection was real, and now it's gone. For Caitlin, that's not just losing a teammate, it's losing the one person who actually balanced the energy in that locker room. And that's where this gets really serious. Caitlin's entering her second pro year, the one that makes or breaks most careers. She's expected to lead, to score, to smile for cameras, to carry a franchise that still doesn't seem sure of itself. She's got the weight of the entire league on her shoulders, and now she'll have to do it without the one person who always had her back. That's brutal, because leadership isn't just about talent, it's about trust. And when your inner circle starts disappearing, the spotlight starts to feel more like a floodlight. Some fans online are already spinning the narrative, saying Lexie's departure proves no one wants to play with Caitlin Clark. That's nonsense. Lexie's exit isn't about Caitlin, it's about a franchise that doesn't know how to support its players. But perception matters, and Caitlin's about to learn that the hard way. Every move she makes next season will be dissected, every reaction turned into headlines, and without Lexie beside her to share the burden, she'll have to grow faster than anyone expected. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe this is the season Caitlin finally becomes the leader people have been waiting for, the player who doesn't just make shots but makes others better. Or maybe if Indiana doesn't fix its mess, it'll break her before she ever gets the chance. Either way, Lexie's absence is going to be felt everywhere. The Fever just lost the one player who never complained, never chased clout, and always put in the work. You can't replace that with a draft pick or a free agent. You can't coach chemistry. You can't teach trust. The Fever's young core, Caitlin, Aaliyah Boston, Lexie, was supposed to be the foundation of a new era. Now that foundation is already cracking before it ever had the chance to stand. And it's not just sad, it's symbolic of everything that's gone wrong with Indiana basketball over the last few years. Too much noise, not enough structure. Too many headlines, not enough wins. What makes Lexie's departure even more poetic in a painful way is that she ended her comments by saying she was proud of how the team fought for the players who couldn't be out there. That line hits hard, because everyone knows she's talking about Caitlin Clark, the star who had to sit out parts of the season, the player Lexie went to battle for every night. And now the very person who fought for her won't even be there next year. It's the kind of irony that hurts. Still, this isn't the end of Lexie Hull's story, it's the start of something bigger. She's stepping away from chaos and toward a system that actually values her. She's betting on herself, and maybe that's what more players need to do. She's seen how the league works, how teams operate, and she's chosen not to wait for change. Instead, she's joining a movement that might just redefine what women's basketball looks like in the next few years. And in the process, she's holding up a mirror to the Fever organization, forcing them to confront the hard truth. You can't build around one star and expect everyone else to stay quiet and loyal forever. The bigger question now is how Caitlin responds. Does she internalize this loss and rise from it? Or does it expose just how fragile Indiana's foundation really is? Because this could go either way. We could be watching the moment Caitlin Clark grows into the undeniable leader she was born to be, or we could be watching the first domino in a much larger collapse. There's no middle ground anymore. With Lexie gone, the excuses are gone too. It's on Caitlin now to lead, to unify, and to remind the Fever what they were supposed to be fighting for in the first place. So maybe Lexie's exit isn't just a loss, it's a wake-up call. For the Fever, for Caitlin, for the entire league. Because players like Lexie Hull don't walk away unless something's truly broken. And when someone that loyal decides she's had enough, everyone should be paying attention. The hint was right there all along. The smile, the polite tone, the perfectly rehearsed goodbye. I'd love to stay, but that's all she needed to say. And the rest, well, that's the story Indiana will be trying to fix for a long time to come. And the truth is, the ripple effect of Lexie Hull's departure is only beginning. Because once one player breaks the silence, others start paying attention. The locker room starts to whisper. Players who were once silent start asking themselves the same question Lexie probably asked all season long: is this really worth it? That's how instability spreads. Not through explosive headlines or public feuds, but through quiet doubt. Through that one lingering thought that maybe the problem isn't the players at all, but the system surrounding them. The Fever's front office probably didn't expect Lexie's exit to sting like this. After all, she wasn't their leading scorer or the face of the franchise. But what they underestimated was how much she symbolized heart. Lexie represented everything a team is supposed to stand for. Grit, loyalty, selflessness. She never demanded the spotlight, never fueled drama, and yet she became the emotional anchor of a franchise trying to rediscover itself. You can't just replace that with stats. You can't trade for chemistry. That's why this hits deeper than any box score could ever show. For Caitlin Clark, this is the first real test of her leadership beyond the court. She's already conquered the ratings game, the ticket sales, and the headlines. But leadership is something else entirely. It's about holding the team together when everything else is falling apart. It's about taking the late-night calls from frustrated teammates, about staying calm when management fumbles the plan, about making everyone believe that somehow they're still building towards something bigger. And now, without Lexie there as the steady hand, Caitlin's going to have to do all of that on her own. But let's be honest, Caitlin Clark isn't built to crumble. She's built to fight. This is the same player who turned the University of Iowa into must-see TV, who carried her college team through impossible games and hostile arenas. She's no stranger to pressure. The difference now is that this isn't college anymore. This isn't a campus community that lives and breathes her success. This is a professional locker room with veterans who've spent years grinding for recognition. And if the front office doesn't fix the tension, it could turn ugly fast. Because once frustration festers, it spreads faster than confidence ever could. Still, there's a side of Caitlin that thrives on moments like this. The fire that makes her jaw clench when refs miss a call. The intensity that makes her clap back when she's cornered. It's the same fire that could make her rise into the leader the Fever desperately need. But that only happens if she learns the one skill Lexie mastered: emotional control. Lexie didn't yell. She didn't pout. She didn't post cryptic social media messages. She just handled her business. If Caitlin can balance her passion with that kind of poise, she'll not only survive this, she'll own it. But let's not sugarcoat things. The Fever have problems that go far beyond one player leaving. Their roster construction has been questionable for years. They've cycled through coaches, lineups, and philosophies like they're drawing names out of a hat. Players get moved around so much that nobody has time to build rhythm or trust. The front office keeps preaching rebuild. But how can you rebuild when the foundation keeps shifting every 6 months? At some point, you have to stop experimenting and start committing. Lexie's words about adapting weren't just a reflection of her own frustration. They were a subtle criticism of management. Because no player should have to spend an entire season reinventing her role just to stay useful. Stability is what turns talent into greatness. Without it, even the best players start to fade. That's what's so frustrating for fans who followed this team from the start. They finally had hope again. A young core with energy, chemistry, and personality. And now, before it even had a chance to mature, it's unraveling. And here's what makes this even more painful. Lexie wasn't chasing fame or money. She was chasing purpose. Joining Unrivaled isn't just about a paycheck. It's about empowerment. The WNBA has been criticized for years for underpaying its players while overworking them. They play overseas in the off-season just to make ends meet, risking injury and burnout. Unrivaled is offering something radical, a way for players to stay home, stay healthy, and still earn what they deserve. It's a league created by players for players, and Lexie joining it sends a message that maybe she believes in that model more than the one she's leaving behind. You can almost imagine the conversations happening behind the scenes, teammates asking each other if they should do the same, agents quietly reaching out to see what Unrivaled could offer. Because once someone like Lexie, who's seen as loyal, grounded, and team first, takes that leap, others follow. It's the domino effect that every sports league fears but rarely admits. Players aren't just assets anymore, they're voices, and when those voices start aligning somewhere else, the old system starts to crack. For Indiana, that's a terrifying thought. This franchise was supposed to be the blueprint for the WNBA's new era, built around Caitlin Clark's stardom and bolstered by hardworking role players like Lexie Hull and Aaliyah Boston. The plan was simple: grow together, win together, build something fans could believe in. But somewhere along the way, the noise drowned out the mission. Between league controversies, coaching chaos, and endless media distractions, the Fever forgot the one thing that actually builds teams' trust, and that's what Lexie took with her when she left. The trust, the unspoken belief that maybe, just maybe, things were getting better. When a player like her walks out the door, it sends a message to everyone left behind. If she's done believing, why should we? That's how locker rooms lose their soul. And rebuilding that takes years. But even as Indiana scrambles to patch the holes, you can't help but respect Lexie for the way she handled it. She didn't burn bridges, she didn't take shots, she simply spoke her truth with grace. That's the mark of a professional who knows her worth. Because sometimes, walking away quietly is louder than any headline. Caitlin Clark will never admit it publicly, but she's hurting over this. You could see it in her body language at the end of the season. Forced smiles, longer pauses, that 1,000-yard stare of someone realizing the people around her are starting to change. She and Lexie weren't just teammates. They were friends who understood the pressure that came with being under a microscope every single day. Lexie's exit leaves Caitlin isolated, surrounded by uncertainty, and facing expectations that feel impossible. She'll have to fill not just a roster gap, but an emotional one. That's the kind of pressure that either breaks a person or turns them into something greater. And Caitlin's story is about to be defined by which way she goes. Maybe this will be the season she stops being the newcomer and becomes the leader. Maybe she'll channel the loss into focus, using Lexie's example as fuel. Or maybe the cracks in this franchise will widen, and we'll be watching another promising career buried under mismanagement. Either way, it's going to be emotional, unpredictable, and impossible to look away from. And for the Fever front office, the clock is ticking. Because the fans are watching too. They're not naive anymore. They see the empty seats, they read the quotes, they know when something's off. If the team doesn't make serious moves this offseason, not just signing players but fixing culture, they risk losing the one thing they can't afford to lose, belief. Lexie Hull's exit might just become the turning point that forces Indiana to finally wake up. Because this wasn't just about one player leaving, it was a reflection of what happens when loyalty isn't valued, when leadership falters, and when communication breaks down. It's a story bigger than basketball. A story about knowing when to walk away from something that no longer fits. Still, there's a poetic side to all of this. Lexie leaves Indiana not with anger, but with dignity. She gave everything she had, blood, sweat, pride, and when she saw it wasn't enough, she chose peace. That's not quitting, that's self-respect. And ironically, it's that kind of decision that defines true strength. And maybe deep down, Caitlin Clark knows that too. Maybe she sees this not as abandonment, but as motivation. Because if there's one thing Caitlin has always thrived on, it's proving people wrong. She's heard the critics her whole career, too emotional, too fiery, too much. Maybe now's the time she shows that being too much is exactly what this team needs. A little fire, a little discomfort, a little shakeup that forces everyone to stop accepting mediocrity and start demanding excellence. Because at the end of the day, that's what Lexie Hull stood for: effort, integrity, and accountability. She didn't play for fame, she played for pride. And losing someone like that should scare Indiana's management more than any stat sheet ever could. Because it's not just about who's leaving, it's about what they're taking with them. And in Lexie's case, she's taking with her the culture that once made this team feel special. So here's where we stand. A star left standing alone, a franchise searching for direction, and a fan base caught between heartbreak and hope. But maybe, just maybe, this is how all great rebuilds begin. Not with comfort, but with loss. Because sometimes it takes a painful goodbye to remind everyone what they're supposed to be fighting for. Lexie Hull's hint wasn't just a message to the fans. It was a mirror held up to the WNBA itself. A quiet challenge to do better, to treat players like people, to create stability, not chaos. And if the league is paying attention, they'll realize what just happened here isn't an isolated story, it's a warning. So yes, this one hurts. It hurts for Caitlin Clark, it hurts for Indiana, and it hurts for everyone who believed they were watching the start of something special. But maybe that's the point. Maybe this goodbye will finally push the Fever and the league to start valuing the players who give everything and ask for nothing but respect in return. Because when the history of this era is written, people might not remember every stat line or every win, but they'll remember this moment, the quiet goodbye that said everything. The smile, the composure, the words that sounded so polite but carried so much weight. I'd love to stay, but... And in that unfinished sentence, Lexie Hull said more than any speech ever could.